Good morning, Jonathan. You are live.
Thanks so much, Rob. Hi, everybody out there. Welcome to the fifth session in our six-part solid wood bioheat webinar series. My name is Jonathan Hallis. I'm going to be the host for today's session. We're going to touch base today with some bioheat leaders from Ontario who've contributed to successful biomass heating initiatives in the province. So as you probably know, during our last webinar, we heard from Kara Sanders and Jordan Hatton regarding some of their reflections on the planning needs for biomass heating projects in First Nations communities. They provided us with some great real-world examples of how bioheat can support community and economic development projects, and how to consider, bioheat fuel system and operational requirements in your project planning. So while last week's session kind of focused on some up-and-coming projects, today we're going to change gears again a little bit and hear from some bioheat leaders who are going to share some Northern Ontario bioheat success stories. So before I move on, I will remind everybody on the call today that we are broadcasting live. In the event of any issues, we're going to be trying to solve those issues very promptly, so please stay on the line. And as well, we're going to be offering recording of the session for review at a later date if you happen to miss part of it or if you're interested in sharing today's session with a friend. So again, happy to share with you guys today that this webinar series is the result of partnership between four groups. That is the Center for Research and Innovation in the Bioeconomy, otherwise known as CRIBE, who's been hosting our registration and recording links. As well, FP Innovations, Natural Resources Canada, and the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry all contributed to the development of this webinar series. So on behalf of our webinar organizing team, thank you so much for your interest and for joining us today. For today's session, we're going to be joined by two speakers. First, we'll hear from Nikki Manitowabi. She works as a business development specialist advisor with Wickwamcong Development Commission on Manitoulin Island. So she's been central to the successful implementation of bioheat technologies and equipment in Wickwamcong unceded territory. And I'm sure you're probably just about as excited as I am to hear about Wiki's bioheat initiative. After Nikki, we'll be joined by Bob Thomas. He's the marketing manager of marketing development and sales with Lackwood Pellets. He's going to share the story behind Lackwood Pellets, which is a successful wood pellet manufacturing business, which thrives as a result of efficiencies in the wood product supply chain. So I'm eager to hear, as I'm sure you are, about some of the business successes that Lackwood has had both at home and abroad. So welcome to Nikki and Bob. Thanks for joining us for today's session. So at the end of the two speaker presentations that we'll hear today, we'll be holding a question and answer period. If you've attended our webinars before, you're probably pretty familiar with the format. So to facilitate this part of the webinar, we'll be using Slido as a platform, and you can access that from your internet browser. So if you've never used Slido before, that's fine. It's quite easy to use. To access the platform, just type the web address displayed on the screen here into your internet browser. And so that's www.sli.do, or you can access directly from the email that was sent to you a little earlier today. So once you're onto the Slido website, you'll see a box to enter a participant code. For today's session, we're going to be using the code Bioheat M4. That's for today's date, March 4th. And so if you have any questions that you'd like to pose to our webinar speakers, please send them over Slido. Other participants will be able to see your questions and kind of upvote on different questions by selecting the thumbs up icon to advance those questions to the top of the list. We want to make sure that the most popular questions are getting asked first. So in the event that we don't actually get through all of the questions for the speakers today, we're looking forward to posting some responses on CRIBE's website, where you would have found information about the webinar series previously. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar session. You don't have to wait until the end. So I think now probably a great time to give everybody a chance to just connect over Slido. And we're going to pose our same weekly question to you just to make sure that you've got a handle on how the system works. So I believe the question is now live in the Slido forum, and the question is, where are you joining us from today? Interested to see kind of what the range of responses is that we get there. Okay, great. All right, so now that everybody's had a chance to kind of jump onto Slido, we're going to initiate our very first speaker presentation for today, and that's going to be Nikki Manitowabi. So if you'll just bear with me for a moment here, I'm going to share a different presentation for you. Okay, and that should be up on screen there. I'll get somebody to confirm that for me. Excellent. Okay, so Nikki, whenever you're ready, just let me know when you'd like me to flip through the slides for you.
Okay. Ani, bonjour, good morning, everyone. I wanted to thank you for inviting us to present our project this morning. And I'd like to acknowledge the project team, both currently and previous. But my name is Nikki Manitowabi, and I work with the Wukomkong Development Commission. And with me,
my name is Sue Manitowabi, Community Energy Planner.
I'd also like to acknowledge our general manager, who's also part of the project team, Marilyn Ojic, and our former community energy planner, David Sinaway, who did quite a bit of work for this project. And he's no longer with us, but Sue's been implementing the project successfully to date. So next slide, please. First of all, I'd just like to let everybody know our community is approximately a 6-hour drive north of Toronto. We're also about two hours southwest of Sudbury, Ontario. And our community consists of the entire peninsula of Manitoulin Island, the eastern peninsula there, that's in green. We also have a portion of our land on the mainland, just south of Sudbury, the Point Grandine Reserve. And we also own quite a few islands in the area. We have a population of about 8,200. Approximately 40%, 45% live in the community. So that represents about 4,000 members. And that equates to about 1,200 homes. Next slide, please. Why Bioheat? One of the reasons we're particularly interested in this project when we saw that we could advocate to be a pilot is that renewable energy is a strategic objective within our strategic plan in our community. We also saw that it aligned beautifully with our community energy plan and looking at sustainability within our community, but also protecting the environment, just being stewards of the land. This particular project, it provided us an opportunity to reduce our carbon footprint and participate in climate change objectives in reducing greenhouse gases. We also are fortunate that we live in Northern Ontario, and it's known to have sustainable forest management regimes. And so this is a good opportunity to have a project that fits within those objectives and having the available resources and networks in Northern Ontario. We saw that this community too had immediate economic benefits in the short term, but the long term as well. We would look at using our own members wherever possible in the installation training, and also independently we have another project. It's a pellet manufacturing plant, and one day we hope to supply our own community with pellets that we manufacture. So we had two sectors in our community that we are looking at. We are looking at the community buildings because they consume the most fossil fuels. And we also looked at opportunities within the community homes. So if we go to the next slide, is the scope of the project in the planning phase. The framework for our work plan and objective were basically in 5 areas. Is we knew that we needed to have a component of communications and awareness. And that involved workshops, it involved demonstration of pellet stoves, information sessions, and we also started to solicit a listing of homeowners that would be interested. And we also did assessments of community buildings that would be eligible to participate in this project. This particular project involved pellet appliances. We are looking at pellet stoves, pellet furnaces, and pellet boilers. We also realized that if we were going to have bulk appliances that required bulk pellets, we would need the necessary infrastructure to have in the community pellet storage facilities and a pellet truck, and also a garage to house the pellet truck. Training and capacity was also another component of the scope of the project. Is we wanted to make sure that we had members trained, that we had several members, maybe about 10, that took the wet training. We sent them to the manufacturing facilities to understand the pellet stoves as well as the furnaces. We tried to build capacity with existing HVAC community businesses that were owned by members. And we had the trainers also come into the community for follow-up training once the appliances were installed, so that the individuals that were initially trained could ask more questions, having been in charge of operating and taking care of the units. The other area that we looked at is the entire supply chain and making sure that we know who to call. We had a good network of different companies and a variety of advisors that assisted us with the planning and development of this project. Once everything was put in place, we had initially calculated when we're done the project. We still have a few more installations to do. Is that we would displace 258,700 liters of fuel with our project, which would equate to 704 tons of greenhouse gas reductions. And just 1 ton of greenhouse gas is equivalent to 4,300 kilometers driving a vehicle. So in closing, the estimate for the demand of pellets would be in the neighborhood of 1,100 to 1,200 tons of pellets per year, and that would be bulk delivery through super sacks and bag pellets. So next slide, please. So our project has gone through a number of years in installations. So in 2017, we were accepted to, our work plan and budget was accepted. The installations were started in 2018, 2019. That particular fall, we had 3 community buildings that saw installations of rolling boilers. And we also had installed 98 residential pellet stoves. These were Stove Builder International pellet stoves. The following year, there were 5 community buildings that saw conversions to the rolling boilers. And also 2 residential furnaces. These were the MESIS systems. And that particular year, we were able to purchase the pellet truck, which would allow for local deliveries. And just this year, we've done 2 residential boilers. These are Frolings and 10 furnaces. And we also were able to construct the pellet silo storage facility, which is 2 78-ton silos that will house and store pellets so that our truck can do local deliveries. We still have to complete 28 residential furnaces. So this is our plant install that Sue is working on right now. Next slide. So this particular slide shows you in the far left of your slide, you'll see the silos in the distance. That particular silo is a 43-ton capacity. And behind that silo is a sea can. So the boilers, there are 3 boilers that are inside the sea can. And if you go to the right, you'll see the interior of that sea can you'll see the boilers there. So this is at our high school. So you can move to the next picture, the next slide, please. This is another school. It is our junior school, and the boilers are, this particular school had enough room inside for the boilers, and so the boilers are inside the school, and there is a silo outside. It's a 23-ton facility. So the first 3 buildings were the 2 schools and a multi-residential complex. It's a 3-story, 30-unit apartment building. So if we move to the next slide, we've gone through such a transition in the delivery and logistics of getting pellets to our buildings. The first year we had contracted out a company that had a pellet truck, so they were able to actually fill our 3 community buildings. And the second year we had not only the 3 buildings, we had the additional 5 buildings to provide pellets for, and a pellet truck is about a 15-ton capacity, so it can't be going up and down the road, 10 hours to Hearst to get pellets or to other locations. It's just so much wear and tear and so many deliveries. And so we really advocated for the necessary infrastructure to have in our community sufficient pellets to provide to the buildings and to deliver. In the second year, we didn't get to the infrastructure at that point, and we were using super sacks. And so there's a whole unload. We've gone through so many unloading processes, everything from using a boom crane to lift the super sacks off the truck, lift them up over the pallet, then drop the pellets into the silo. These are interim unloading processes because we've been just waiting for our infrastructure. And here you see a forklift and a loader unloading the super sacks. And to the left, the super sacks are held over the hopper at the silo storage facility. And this particular hopper, it has a blower system that blows the pellets up into the silos. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see the 2 large 78-ton silos that house our supply for our community. This is a little bit dated picture. It was earlier in the fall, and there's a garage going up that stores where our truck is parked. You'll see also our pellet truck, and it has about a 13-ton capacity for pellets. And so what happens here is the truck will go under the silos and it'll load from up on top. It'll load into the top of the truck. So we've had a little bit of hiccups with our blower system. What happens here is a long haul transport will come. We had one delivery with a walking floor trailer that unloads the pellets into the hopper. And we have a few adjustments that we have to do. We have to make sure the venting's in place to allow for the flow of pellets, and we need possibly a larger opening for our hopper. So these are some of the hiccups that we're going through right now with the system, but we're looking at fixing all this, and it should be operational by this spring. Just waiting for the cold weather to be over. So that's sort of speaks to the delivery mechanism that we have in place now. We're using super sacks to load the storage facility. So if we move to the next slide, I'd just like to touch a little bit on the residential installations. is we have a targeted 40 residences to install the Mises furnace systems. And so what they have is they have the furnace on the left with the internal hopper. And then we also have this flexo storage. Now, this is the truck needs to unload pellets to the flexo storage. So that storage unit can be inside or outside the home. So if we go to the next slide, we actually see an installation that was done in one of our homes. And this particular installation, the flexo storage is in the interior of the home. Is you need to have an assessment to make sure that the ductwork can be easily swiped out from a fossil fuel appliance to the Mises furnace. And you need to make sure that there's sufficient height for and space for the flexo storage. So there's an intake outside the home, and the pellet truck pulls up, and it just like filling your fuel tank, but we have a pellet truck, it delivers pellets. If we look at the next example of a Mises system, we can go to the next slide. This demonstrates a couple of installations that are done outside the home. And in this particular instance, there was not sufficient space or height in the home. And so this flexo storage is located outside. And on the right, you'll see that it's enclosed with a roof and walls and access. So this is how it would look, and this is one of our very early installations of the Mises furnace. So we can move to the next slide. And for the residential pellet stoves, there are about 98 of those, close to 100 pellet stoves in our community. We used Stove Builders International. Members of our community were trained under a wet inspector, and we actually have 2 members that wrote their tests and are now wet inspected, so they can do the warranty work and the servicing of the units that are in our community. So this is just a picture of one of the crews that did some installations a couple years ago. Next slide. We'd like to acknowledge that the community really relied on quite a few companies within Northern Ontario, and some of these companies were involved in the installation, in the sales, and the servicing, and the provision of pellets, and and financing of our project. So we can move to the next slide. Some of the key lessons that we've learned is that if you look to the picture there, is that the quality of pellets, the size of the pellets, and sourcing pellets is really important. We had some issues with some of the pellets. If they're too long, they sort of create a log jam in the piping of some of the appliances, particularly the furling appliances. But with the furnaces, it wasn't an issue. We also realized in our first year that you need to negotiate the supply from the manufacturing a year before to make sure you lock down adequate supply. What we're finding is that even with our local retailer is they cannot source pellets after January, and so they were actually coming to us to ask for pellets. And so even though we try to have a lot of education and communication to our members to order your pellets in August and September so there's no issue, you're stockpiled ready for winter, sometimes it doesn't happen until it's really cold outside and they want to order them and they want them that week, and it doesn't happen that fast. You need at least 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks lead time. And sourcing your pellets, with COVID, we've learned that we needed a backup plan, and we are fortunate to have a good network of other companies that we have contacts and we're able to get a backup supply. And the delivery of pellets, the transportation and logistics of that delivery are so important. Is you have to understand what kind of equipment is coming in, what kind of equipment you need to unload, the delivery time. And, a lot of times the trucks come and they want to be in and out as fast as possible. So you have to have an area to store your super sacks or your pellets. They're subject to weather conditions, and just making sure they're tarped getting here as well. So there's quite a few lessons to learn. And one of the items too is making sure you have your warranty process in place with the manufacturers of these appliances, and that you have a supply or an inventory of parts that may go, so that your staff can service, or people in the community can have their units serviced in a timely fashion. Next slide. Some considerations for communities that are looking at projects like this is that if there are changes in government, provincial or federal, there may be delays, not just in reevaluating the priority of the project under their own mandate, but also looking at signing contribution agreements. These get a little bit delayed when there's an election. We also like to relay that, with our community buildings, we did have an issue with an expansion tank, and it's important to make sure that you don't just look at the switching out of the appliances, you look at all the ancillary equipment that's involved in the system. So some engineering is definitely required for the more complex applications. Procurement of quality pellets is something that you need to look at. I know that we had chunks of wood in one of our deliveries, and it's just waste wood that companies were selling as pellets. We've learned quite a bit with Sue and the crew that's going in to do the assessments in the homes. Is they need to look at the electrical panel, make sure there's enough room to connect a furnace. They have to look at the existing ductwork to see how complex it is to attach the new appliance. So some ductwork will be required. They also need to look at the chimney and assess the flue. There are different requirements for wood pellet heating as opposed to fossil-based appliances. Other considerations are the height of the basement and if there's adequate space in the home. A lot of our homes are older and they don't have a lot of space in the basement. A lot of them are crawl spaces, and so you need to look at, maybe it's an exterior storage solution. We also had our delivery driver look at the delivery to the home. You need to look at the overhead wires. The truck sometimes needs to lift its tank to deliver if it's close to empty. And also the structure of the home is sometimes there's some carpentry required for the stairs to bring in the appliance if it's an older home. And more importantly is you need to have the necessary skills for the installation, but also moving forward. We did undertake quite a bit of training, and even though there's training of the maintenance and operating staff that are currently maintaining the community buildings, there's also that willingness to adapt to these new technologies. And so we've had some pushback, but there's also some that are so very keen and they're very, very good. And that's important to have that capacity within your community. There's ongoing training and education, and even though there were information sessions and there were demonstrations, is what Sue is working on now is YouTube videos to help the homeowner to look at maintaining their system and just troubleshooting certain areas. So communications and education is ongoing. And with COVID, we've had delays in our projects, sometimes getting parts. the cost of wood has gone up tremendously, so the exterior storage solutions are very expensive. And what we'd like to say is there are a lot of people that really, really like their appliances, and we get stopped at the store or somewhere and they just want to let us know they really like the heat. It's even heat, so the feedback has been good. With some of the installations, you really have to make sure the homeowner understands that with the pellet stoves, there's ongoing regular maintenance that's required. And if the homeowner is a little bit elderly or frail, is lifting the 40-pound bags is going to be challenging for them. Next slide is just like to say to Miigwech is thank you, and Sue and I are here to answer any questions. Miigwech.
Good.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Nikki, Sue, Miigwech, for the presentation. Really appreciate it. You've got a very inspiring project in Wickwamcong, so very pleased that you were able to share your story with everybody on the webinar today. Look forward to maybe passing along some of our viewer questions for you. So I guess kind of moving on to our next presentation here, I'm going to ask Bob to maybe look at sharing his presentation. We're going to hear from him and his experience working with Blackwood pellets.
Good morning. Trying to pull this up. You got it?
Not seeing it just yet there, Bob.
Well, you may have to take control if I'm not pulling this up.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I will get that shared right away. Okay, can you see that up on the slide?
I have a bit of a visual problem here in the sense that part of one of Nikki's slides is still on screen.
Oh,
at least on my screen.
Yeah, my apologies for that. That's my fault on my end.
Oh, so I can't fully see my own slides. What can I do there?
So what do you see up on screen there, Rob? Maybe you can.
Yeah. Yes. It doesn't appear to show either. Now I got rid of that slide. Yes, but I still have everybody showing up on the bottom screen. Jonathan's there, Nikki's there. Yeah, it does sort of show the majority. I still have the sort of part of the control panel. I don't have to touch the open share tray, do I? Okay, well, I'm going to have to play it a little bit by ear because I can only, well, let's try this slide one. Yes. Yeah. Okay, I will try to be as loud as possible. We are a small family-owned business in Hearst, Ontario. Relatively speaking, we're a small pellet producer when you look at the bigger plants in British Columbia and Quebec in particular, as far as Canada goes. Our location can be both a disadvantage and an advantage. They do offset. We have great distances to get to our number of retail customers. But on the same token, pellet producers outside of Ontario have great distances to try and access them as well. Essentially, our basic premise is quality products at competitive prices. Next slide, please. Our liquid heating pellets, of course, are our primary product. They're made from local sawmill and softwood residuals, primarily shavings. They exceed the quality standards set for EN Plus A1 certification. The primary component, of course, and consideration for homeowners is heat output, which is measured in British thermal units per pound. You have to look at moisture content, which is a consideration if you want a nice hot burning pellet. Ash, durability, fines, and length, something that Nikki alluded to, which I'll touch on again later. Animal bedding is also our secondary product. It's also made from the same local sawmill softwood residuals, primarily used for horse bedding, but it's also used for smaller animal bedding. It's great in kitty litter boxes, and it has that nice pine scent. It's very disposable because it's compostable, and it's also used extensively in a number of large poultry barns. For the most part, pellets outperform most other animal bedding products, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is so absorbent. It's much more economical because you're basically sifting out what comes out of the horse, as opposed to throwing away a whole bunch of your bedding products at the same time. So there's a lot less waste. It's readily compostable, which is quite attractive to area gardeners. Purity is a big consideration, particularly for horses. If you're investing thousands of dollars in an animal, you want to ensure that if there are going to be any sort of issues caused by the bedding that's going to result in huge veterinary bills, but you want the purest product that you can get. It has the same high standards as fuel pellets, except for the fact that it's probably generally less dense, which is fine because one of the first things you do when you put down pellets to make bedding is you add water, which as far as heating pellets goes is a major enemy. We use very protective wrapping to ensure that the product doesn't absorb moisture before you are ready to use it. And one other consideration for a lot of horse owners is the fact that it takes a lot less storage space. Next pellet, or next slide. There we are in the middle of the northern boreal forest, just outside of Hearst, Ontario, within the boreal forest wood basket. We're primary highway access is via Highway 11, both west and east. We, as I mentioned, are geographically challenged if you look at the rough map in getting products to market. But we have an excellent working relationship with third-party carriers, particularly in meeting the demands of chain retailers. Delivered westerly via Highway 11 down to Marathon area, Harris Bay area, and Highway 17 beyond Thunder Bay, as far west to Spear Falls. Easterly, we go into northwestern Quebec. Eastern Ontario, generally I think Renfrew is probably one of the furthest. And the near north of Ontario down through Timmins, New Liskeard, North Bay, Parry Sound. Southern and southwestern Ontario via Highways 11, 17, and 69. If you look at that inner circle, that basically represents a 500-kilometer distance from ICS at Hearst, and the outer circle represents 1,000 kilometers. Now that's not driving distance, that's as the crow flies. Driving distance, of course, you're going to meander, and it's going to be somewhat more extensive than that. We are suppliers of both the pellet products to major distribution warehouse, chain retail distribution warehouse in southwestern Ontario as well. Next slide. ICS pellet business has its origins in the lumber business, lumber industry in that part of Ontario. The downward spiral of the softwood lumber industry in the 90s, of course, took a lot of people by surprise, and unfortunately, too many companies went belly up. Those who were successful were the ones who moved on. The LaCroix family business reestablished themselves as a manufacturer of furniture components under contract to big box retailers in 2005. The zero waste policy led to the utilization of furniture product residuals. If you have all this waste and you can actually turn it into something, turn it into a valuable product, you're definitely way ahead. So they initiated wood pellet production in 2010, creating this value-added commodity. We started with 2 pellet presses and added a 3rd press 1 year later. Next slide. We, with the fulfillment of that furniture contract to a major chain store, we initiated full pellet production solely in about 2014. Quality feedstocks are sourced from local planer mills, and that's absolutely necessary. We then looked at a renewed focus on product marketing and website development. This is about where I came into the picture. Of course, as you realize, I'm not a member of the Blackwood Lacroix family. I had retired from M&R in 2006, and I had used quite a number of pellet brands in heating my home, but I was also always a little dismayed that I was getting pellets from the West Coast, from Quebec, from the East Coast, from Michigan, Wisconsin, from New York, but there were no pellets from Ontario. And with all of our forest industry, what were we missing here? Then I found Blackwood pellets, and I was so taken with them that I dashed off an email to the company in Hearst. Then I got a phone call from Norm Lacroix, the family patriarch, who asked what I normally do, and I told him I was retired, so he invited me to Hearst. A few days later, I came back with a cell phone, a business card, and a job that I didn't really need. We're growing our market share, and we're growing our delivery areas. So we added a 4th press in 2015. We increased production capacity again in 2016 with a 5th press. This brought our annual production up to about 9,600 metric tons. We initiated also at this time export sales to the northeastern US and to pellet distributors in southern Italy, primarily down through Sicily, Sardinia, and tip of the boot. Next step, please. Now, very recently, in fact, this current winter, we added our 6th larger press, and we have forecasted our production capacity is going to be somewhere in the area of about 14,000 metric tons by the time we get through this year. But with a future coming season, we are looking at theoretical production capacity of up to about 24,000 metric tons a year. And our ongoing growth is driven for the most part by pellet demands, market demands. We will never overpromise and underdeliver. Next slide. Biomass heating, one of the attractions, of course, is that it's carbon neutral. Now, there's some differing opinions on that, but I leave it up to you to do your own Googling and investigations and make your own mind up about that. We're already convinced. This is a green energy solution, and we are appealing to the green thinkers, and reduction of carbon footprint is important to everybody these days. It's something we're all talking about. We provide energy efficient, economical, and cost competitive alternative to fossil fuels. Our northern location gives us approximate relocation or locations to many small and indigenous communities. Many of them, of course, lack heating options that you can have for larger centers, as well as the fuel options. We are an Ontario-grown solution, utilizing residuals from sustainably managed forests, which is the same pretty much, excuse me, throughout Canada. Our market growth is domestically driven, and of course we're driven by the growing green energy popularity. It's an ongoing and growing demands from European markets as well. Italy, Netherlands, Great Britain primarily. Surprisingly, Italian pellet production alone exceeds 3 million metric tons a year. And this is primarily almost from imports. They hardly make any of their own pellets. They're used primarily in home heating pellet stoves and small furnaces. Italy has more pellet stoves per capita than any other country on the planet, surprisingly. Italian consumers are very fastidious about what they put in their stoves. They value quality Canadian pellets made from what they describe as virgin wood fiber. Next slide. We look at the advantages to heating with pellets. There's an availability of the product to numerous small and large retailers as opposed to fossil fuel distributors which generally emanate from much larger centers. And of course, there's always transportation involved as well with a lot of that. We deliver not just to small, remote, and indigenous communities, but as well as into the larger urban centers. Price stability is an attraction for wood pellets. There's generally lower cost versus the fluctuating higher cost of most fossil fuels. And then there's electricity, which doesn't seem to fluctuate too much. It just keeps going up. We're very cost competitive. We provide affordable, suitable heating options. If you look at lower heating appliance purchasing and installation costs, a pellet stove will probably run, let's say, on average about $2,000, and the installation, in addition to the venting, is probably about $350 to $400. Compared to a wood stove, it's much cheaper. But if we look at the chimneys and what you have to put up and getting it installed, it can be quite costly. So we look at, as Nikki had mentioned, a variety of heating options to meet a range of home heating demands. There are small pellet stoves, smaller furnaces, as well as smaller boiler systems. We ship in 40-pound bags. We've also looked at the possibility of a 25-pound bag, although this gets a little bit pricey. Bulk totes and break bulk pellets to feed the smaller silos. Next slide. You have to start with quality feedstock. Without quality feedstock, you're not going to end up with a quality product. Rigid quality control is an absolute must. And when we talk about quality feedstocks as well, there's no bark, no contaminants, and certainly no additives. We did have some issues with longer pellets, as Nikki had mentioned. And when that gets into a blower system, it's usually a bit of an issue because it can block the pellets from moving. It's generally not a problem though with stoves. Purity is mandatory when you look at animal bedding. I mentioned the cost of maintaining horses and the veterinary costs. So you want to make sure that you've got a pure product. Quality heating pellets mean high heat output, few fines, durable pellets, and minimal appliance maintenance. Blackwood pellets, for instance, we're proud to say, have one of the lowest ash contents on the market at 0.25%. And if you're going to heat your home with a pellet stove, yes, regular maintenance is mandatory, it's a must. CAN Plus certification is required for exports, which is the Canadian equivalent of EN Plus A1 that the Europeans have established. We currently are not export certified, and we would look at that if and when it becomes a requirement and we have sufficient export contracts to justify it. Next slide. Customer service. I can't stress customer service enough. Our retailers are direct and primary customers. Their customers, the consumers, are also our customers, if you look at it that way. We have to be responsive and we have to be reliable. And when somebody contacts a retailer to say they're having an issue with a pellet, generally those issues are relayed to us. And people are always surprised at how we are in getting back to them. We don't put them on hold. We do answer our phones, we answer our emails, and we get back to them. We try to resolve every issue. We don't resolve every issue, of course, it's probably impossible, but we want to make sure that people are as happy as possible. We have an ability to track our production batches. Every bag is numbered. We can tell you when that pellet was made, when it was bagged, when it was shipped. And in keeping with website development, we've been told that it's both quite informative and quite educational. We also have links to a number of other websites so people can find out just what it is that they're getting into before they actually go out and purchase a pellet stove. We've wasted no money on improving package durability, which is very important. And people have told us that it not just protects the product, but it makes the handling of the product that much easier. And we've also improved packaging protection for both shipping and storage. Not everybody can keep their pellets in a garage or at a basement or in a shed. Sometimes they have to be stored outside, and we want to make sure that they're not going to be destroyed by moisture or critters or whatever have you as such happens. Last slide.
Great, just give you a 2-minute warning here, Bob.
Yeah. Our relationship with Remicon Development Corporation has been a win-win partnership, and I think Nikki sort of pointed that out. It certainly created a new market for us, and it created solutions and opportunities for heating challenges for the community. Single, multi-residential, educational, and institutional. I have to commend the foresight and the determination of Wiki when the government canceled the project funding partway through. They were still able to keep things on track and get things going. The project has not been without its challenges, long shipping distances, offloading, storage, and I would certainly like to thank Biothermic and Dex Rudder for their assistance step by step as we come through them. It was a gradual growth and development, much like our own business, and this is an excellent model project for both Indigenous and smaller communities who want to emulate their success. Next slide. We wholesale our products to over 100 retail points across Ontario and Quebec. We're supplying bulk heating pellets to institutional, educational, and industrial facilities. We also supply bag and bulk bedding pellets to horse markets. Next slide. It's important that we maintain product quality and standards, and primary consideration is going to be sourcing additional quality feedstocks. We don't want to be limited by the amount of pellets we can produce by the amount of feedstocks that we have to develop or to process. Our step-by-step growth keeps pace with market demands. We wanted to ensure that our reach never exceeded our grasp. We're open and receptive to innovation and improvements within the industry, and we want to reduce direct production costs to counter inflation and maintain that price stability for our consumers. Increase our market share is important both in our established areas, and we want to grow to additional domestic markets. We would like to rekindle export relationships with Italian and other European market customers, and we will certainly respond to and investigate new marketing opportunities. Last slide. Thank you. Merci. Make much, and we will take questions as we can. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob, for sharing the story of Lackwood. That's fantastic to hear about some of the capacity increases that you guys have made over the last few years. Certainly really exciting for you guys. So now at this point, we're going to move over to our question and answer period for this session today. So I'll ask my colleague Rob to maybe pull up our Slido screen so that we can see the questions that have been rolling in for our two speakers this morning. Perfect. I sure can. Thanks so much for getting that up and going there, Rob. Okay, so it looks like our very first question that came in here is for Nikki and community. Sue, you as well too on this one. So question from Todd Eastman, which says, congratulations, Nikki and community, for becoming the wood heat capital of Ontario. How has the community responded to this new approach to heating? Anything you can share with us on that?
For the MESIS systems, I know that I've run into a couple of the community members that have these systems, and they really like them. Like the systems look beautiful in their home, but also it seems to be a steady heat. Like they just love the heat part, and it's easy to maintain. They probably have to look at them once a year for service and maintenance, but it's not like a pellet stove where you have to do something every week or every other week. So Sue, I don't know, you've talked to quite a few as well.
A lot of the feedback is the even distribution of the whole house of the heat, especially with the ductwork, how much it radiates the heat. Just the ductwork itself, while the heat is being transported through the home. So those are big big things happening that they like. They could never get a normal furnace could never heat up their basement enough for them to be comfortable in the heating. The Mises furnaces are surpassing all their expectations of what they need for heat. They actually, a lot of the homes, we had to dial the furnaces down because they're actually too efficient. The homes that we have to dial it down to 60% of what the furnace's capabilities are, and the functioning capabilities of the furnace are surpassing a lot of functionality problems we had with the boilers and pellet stoves. So the furnaces are surpassing the longer pellet kind of issues that we had with the stoves and the boilers. So the furnaces can take pellets that are a little bit bigger due to the auger system that grind it up and push it into the pneumatic vacuum air system to pull it into the furnace. So they're surpassing a lot of things. And another thing I must mention is the interface with technology is pretty neat. The homeowners are learning about that. What that means is the interface. Homeowners are allowed to use like our smartphones or tablets to interact with the program on the Mises furnace to adjust either temperatures or time of day. When they leave, they could go on vacation. They could adjust their furnace when they're on vacation. Things like that. So those are neat things that are features are with the furnaces, as well as the technology is proven overseas in the program logic controllers with the PLCs on the furnaces as well. The cleaning is very easily done with the furnaces. Is once a year. That's nice. It's very another thing is the labor. There's a lot of labor required with the pellet stoves, but the furnaces is very minimal. So the elders like that the part, or the older citizens that that was troublesome with the pellet stoves.
That's good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great, so much. Fantastic to hear kind of how the community is kind of rallying around these new technologies that you guys have been working to install. Great news. Thanks for sharing. So it looks like the next question that I've got here is for Bob. And so the question is, Bob, have you looked at sourcing fiber directly from the forest, the cost and the feasibility of that? Oh, looks like you're on mute there, Bob.
Yes, we have looked at that, but there are two ways you have to look at sourcing biomass and creating biomass. If you're going to keep with the trend to green energy, you're going to take what would be looked at as waste product and create a value added, because you're taking the waste essentially from either planer mills, sawmills, or from manufacturing, and you're turning that into something that can be used rather than have to be disposed of. The other alternative, of course, is turning roundwood, basically grinding it up and cutting it down, harvesting, trucking, grinding it up, and making pellets out of it, which is something that they do in the southern United States with basically yellow pine plantations. But this is the quality of timber there is certainly not as high just for that. General rule of thumb is as well that if you are transporting feedstock more than 100 kilometers, you're probably going to be losing money right off the bat. So we want to stick with the trend towards green energy, reducing our carbon footprint, utilizing clean products. And so for us, it's just not feasible.
Good insight to share there. Thanks, Bob, for taking that one. I do see that we've got a few questions that rolled in from Romy here, although our friend John Arsenault has been stepping in to help provide a response there. So I'm hoping maybe John's response to Romy there settles that one. And we can move on maybe to Todd's question down below. And he's wondering, again, I think looking at Nikki, you know, in Wikwemikong, are you seeing lower heating bills compared to those old propane systems?
I would say, I'm one of the homeowners that were fortunate to be part of the program as well, and I've opted into the Froling boiler, And prior to this, I exchanged it from a propane boiler, and I could tell you that my heating bill is, I know that weather has a lot to do with the cost of heating your home, but I've seen significant reductions in my heating costs for my home. I have in-floor heating and domestic hot water that is heated from the pellets, and I love my heat in my house. Is more steady, but yeah, there is a reduction in heating bills for myself, and I would imagine we'll be doing some metrics with homeowners and with our community buildings, and I'm almost confident we'll see lower operating costs.
Great, certainly a good news story to go along with those installs that you've been making. So thanks for sharing your own kind of personal experience with that technology. Mm-hmm. Looking at the time, I see that we are a little over this afternoon now. We're at a couple minutes after noon. So I think at this point, probably best to wrap up the session. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us again today. Really appreciate all of the presentations that we received, and appreciate everybody tuning in to listen to the stories that we had to share today. And so on this note, I'll maybe remind folks that we've got one more webinar session coming up next week. That's going to be looking at kind of a similar story to today, except we're going to be expanding our scope a bit and look at some bioheat success stories from right across the country, coast to coast to coast there. So looking forward to having you sign up for that. If you found today's interesting, you're bound to find next week's interesting as well too. So you can find details about that session at CRIBE's website. That's just cribe.ca/resources/bioheat-webinar-series. And of course, if you have any questions about the session today or the series in general, please reach out to me. You can see my email address on the slide there. And of course, you've been getting emails from me over the last couple of days as well too, so feel free to just respond to one of those. Again, Bob, Nikki, Sue, thank you so much for your presentations. Miigwech, really appreciate you sharing your success stories with us today. Hopefully we've inspired some folks to start some bioheat projects in their own communities or their own homes. So with that, we'll sign off. Thanks so much. Have a great day.